the rustle of grass, the clatter of hoofs, the whistle of string, and the whiff of a step wind that fell into a hollow stem. All these sounds that surrounded our ancestors. Listening, people learned to play them, inventing a variety of musical instruments. Mobile, lightweight, and convenient for nomadic life. It's a project about musical instruments created by the great nomadic civilization. The rhythms of percussion instruments are sounds that accompany the human race since ancient time. Once, clapping in ancient men made the first sound. Then he knocked with stones and sticks. After a while, a variety of percussion instruments were invented. True, it was unlikely that they were then referred to as musical ones. With their help, they hunted, warned of danger, frightened the enemy, celebrated victory, and believed in their healing properties. Today it is a whole group of instruments, without which most musical works of any genre are unlikely to be played. After all, the drums beat the rhythm, the very heart of any music. By the way, the word drum most likely has Turkic roots. According to different versions, it could have come from the Tatar Daraban or Turkish Balaban, where ban from the ancient Turkic is translated as sound. The Kazakh people also have long had their own classification of percussion instruments. This is called Shindal. The next instrument is called Dangara. We have it big. During the war, it was convenient to carry it with you. Also among percussion instruments, there are double pass and a double. The name of the instrument double literally means alarm. In ancient times, it was used to alert an enemy attack. Some types of this signal instrument could reach 2 meters in diameter. The bigger it was, its sound was heard more. But there were hiking options. There is a lot of evidence for this, both in scientific sources and in folklore. In oral literature, this instrument is referred to as one of the 5 weapons of the warrior, and in the famous heroic epos Koblan the Batır, the main character is described as a rider on a raven horse with a tightly bandaged tail, holding chainmail in front of him and locked to the saddle.
Бұл Қытай деректерінде кездеседі, яғни Шици дерекнамасында. Онда жалпы 2 дерек кездеседі, 2 деректе де.
This instrument is also found in Chinese sources. In particular, there are 2 references in Shiji's historical notes. In both cases, it is said that the ruler of China attacked the eastern Huns and noticed that the standard bearers at the head of the Hunnish army carried the double together with the flag. This indicates that the double had the same value as the flag and was necessary in battle. Another percussion instrument, the dangara or tambourine, has a completely different story. It is a sacred instrument used in ritual practice around the world.
Шаманы или баксы являются одним из древнейших
Shamans or bakse are one of the oldest, one might say, the oldest type of spiritual servants of the great steppe, and in general, of all mankind. The functions of shamans were physical healing, harmonization of relations in society, opening the road, cleansing from some harmful spiritual influences. They could not become a shaman of their own free will. One might say, nature itself created them. One of the representatives of modern shamanism is Almaty resident Baurjan Jalkibayev, but he does not like when people consider him as the shaman. He considers it incorrect. According to him, followers of the Tengri tradition, which included the ancestors of the Kazakhs, called their clergymen Kam. The constant companion of the shaman is the tambourine, and in Kazakh, the dangra is related to the appearance of the sturm. They didn't play it, they flogged it if you heard such an expression. It is from here that the term kam in Tuvan or kam in Turkic in Kazakh comes. This is the designation of the word shaman. If we talk about statuses, they call me using my spiritual name like Hovagan Tobet Kam, not Bakse, not some terms, a shaman and so on, and here is precisely Kam. Therefore, a tambourine is an exclusively priestly, exclusively shamanistic attribute. In shamanism, it is called the horse of the wind. When traveling to the lower world, the tambourine served as a boat. When, for example, traveling to the upper world, the tambourine played the role of a horse of wind, on which the shaman sat and made a trip to one point or another. With this instrument, shamans achieve an altered state of consciousness, which is necessary for the ritual. The most famous description of the significance of a tambourine for ritual practice, made by the famous Native American shaman named Black Elk, was recorded by an American historian and ethnographer John Nygaard. The round shape of the drum represents the universe. The shaman considered, and its uniform, strong rhythm as a pulse, a heart beating in the center of the universe. This is the voice of the Great Spirit, and this sound excites us and helps us understand the secret and power of everything. Ancient beliefs are reflected in our days, so scientific studies have shown that playing percussion instruments helps reduce stress, strengthen immunity, and even lower blood pressure. Well, traditionally, a tambourine has certain rhythms, such as the rhythm of a deer, the rhythm of a bear, the rhythm of a raven, and so on, the rhythm of a spider. And with the help of one or another rhythm, as was established by one of my teachers, with the help of rhythm and sound, accordingly, vibrations, you can work with human chokers. That is, you can work with human vibrations and heal. That is, harmonize one or another choker, respectively. This will affect its healing, getting rid of any disease or harmonization of a person. Today, this instrument is actively used by folklore groups on stage. Remembering its sacred nature, masters and musicians try to preserve the color of the instrument, making it exclusively from natural materials and decorating with authentic images.
Даңғыраны әрлеу әр шебердің өзінің бір идеясы бойынша келетін нәрсе. Мысалы,
Each master in his own way decorates the dangra instrument. It depends on his idea. For example, this one is round, and the back of the case is decorated like this.
әдемі көрінетіндей болу үшін.
Of course, there are several types of this instrument. In my hands is average, and this one is considered large. You see, it is made in the shape of an octagon. The more dangra, the lower sounds it makes. Taking the ritual instrument to the stage, shamans are asked to pay attention to the cross on the back of the case, for which it is convenient to hold a tambourine. This is what distinguishes the Turkic shamanistic attribute. Indeed, in an ordinary frame tambourine it is absent. But dangura is not only the instrument that has sacred value. Traditionally, the Kazakh shamans revered three attributes: kilkobuz, dangura, and shankobuz.
Выбор инструментов, которыми пользовались духовные деятели,
The choice of instruments used by spiritual leaders was not his personal choice. Just the spirits came to him in a dream and told him the news that he would be a shaman, salsari, akin, and so on. In the same way, he was given this instrument. He was able to directly order to make this instrument or order it.
или заказать его.
Shankobuz, despite the similarities in the names with kilkobuz, has nothing to do with bow instrument, except for application. This is a small reed instrument, also known as harp. It's also common among shamans. It was a purely personal instrument, in the sense that when a person plays on a komuz, on a shankobuz, only those who place these riffs can hear overtones and all the beauty of sound, because the epicenter of sound is somewhere in the center of the skull, if we say vibrationally. That is, the sound is extracted from here, but penetrating through the cheeks, through these cavities, sinuses, it somehow concentrates right in the center and just plays. And even if you are a meter away from this person, you can hear the beauty of this instrument. You can even admire the beauty of the sound of this instrument. But only the player himself can feel, hear, and feel the whole spectrum. Another important aspect is instrument manufacturing. It is considered ideal if the shaman makes it with his own hands. There is such a parable that when an instrument is born, three spirits settle in it. The first is the spirit of the tree from which the body of this instrument was made. The second is the spirit of the animal whose skin is used for this instrument. And the third is the spirit of the master who gave birth, who gave these things a second life, who brought them together, who harmonized and transformed it into a particular instrument. If you believe this parable, then in Kazakhstan, tambourines live the spirits of birch and maple of the north of the country, and goats whose skin is used to create a membrane. Master Mirbek Dilmanov makes these instruments for most domestic musicians.
Дауылпаздың да артыңғы шанақтары қазан сияқты болып келетін, соны әр шанағын бәрін сол қайың ағашынан.
The Dalpas course resembles a cauldron in shape. We make it from soft wood. Prepare layers of thickness 3.54 millimeters, bend them, and assemble the body of the necessary shape.
Қойдың терісіне қарағанда, қойдың терісі ол тез жыртылады. Ешкінікі мықты, ұзаққа бара жыртылмайтын. Сосын
In the manufacture of percussion instruments, we most often use goat skin. It is more durable than, for example, sheep. To make large doubles, we use bovine leather to withstand the impact of the beater. Once we were ordered a very large double, almost 1.5 meters in diameter. We covered with camel skin.
Диаметр 1.30 үлкен дабыл бір жағазы келді.
Many musicians follow the tradition of producing percussion and noise instruments on their own. Maksad Jusupaliyev at one time worked in several famous ensembles, for which he came up with more than one accompanying instrument. But his main passion is Dalpas drums, which the master makes in the form of yurts and decorates with carved national patterns.
Мынау қазіргі жетістіктері жеткізген. Мынаның бәрінде жаңа теріні өзім былай тартамын ғой.
Look, the skin just pulled on those old ones, and now I'm doing it like this. I stretch the skin, hem, and on top I put on such a metal hoop with special levers that allow you to adjust the screed and the sound depends on it.
Мынаны босатсақ,
Now if you release it,
мыналар. Мынандай. Әртүрлі дыбысқа арналған.
here the sounds are different. In addition, I use lighter wood. It is easier to work with it. So I now began to make such drums.
Жасауға да оңай болар, сондықтан осындай етіп жасап жатыр қазір.
In addition to drums, percussion instruments include such an exotic device as horse hooves, processed in a special way. They are called tiaktas and are used to decorate musical compositions.
Негізіне жаңа сойылған аттың тұяғын кесіп алып, арнайы
For the manufacture of this instrument, during the slaughter of horses, their hoofs were cut off and boiled in water for a long time.
Қайнаған тұяқты алып,
Boiled horse hoofs were thoroughly cleaned of bones and meat and dried under the sun.
әркім өз патша көңіліне сәйкес.
Then each person decorated this instrument on their own. For example, it could be inlaid with silver or gold. Often, in order for a couple of tiaktas not to get lost, a leather strap was tied to them.
Арнайы қайыспауды байлап қоятын болған.
In many of our cues, for example, at Tatalgao, in any other, there is often a clatter of hoofs, like this.
Техникалық
Technically, this one,
қиындау болады, ойнау. Сосын бертін
it's hard to play. Therefore, over time, I took such a wooden bucket and replaced them with these hoofs.
ауыстырдым. Деп ауыстырдым. Бертін келе көбірек әртүрлі
And even later, to enrich the orchestra and give a different sound, I came up with such an instrument from cow horns. If there were only 2 horns, there would be such a sound, and here there are 7.
мына жерде
And each sounds differently. For example, here we have low notes, and here, higher pitch.
жоғары дауыстар.
A satayak is another ancient instrument that was most often used in the same way in ritual practice. This is such a rod on which various bells and pendants were strung. According to an ancient belief, their sounds had sacred power. It was believed that such ringing of a satayak scares away evil spirits. Today, dozens of varieties of this noise instrument can be seen on stage. This is also an asatayak, but there are few pendants. It is called dance. It is designed to decorate the dance, helps emphasize the rhythm, and should not sound too loud.
2, 3, 4, пам, 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 пам. Назад. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. И 1, 2, 3, 4. И 1.
This performance in Kazakhstan's dance art is the same as Swan Lake in ballet or Turkish march in music. The dance asatayak is in the repertoire of every major choreographic collective in the country.
Тұрдық, бітірдік.
Бұл би
This dance is staged to the music of our famous composer Nurgisat Lindiev, just called Atatolgao. And asatayak is our national instrument. In the dance we show the grace of Kazakh girls, which is emphasized by the light ringing of a satayak. So we still let the viewer hear how the ancient instrument sounds. This dance is over 30 years old. In 1985, it was staged by the national artist, choreographer Zaurbek Raibayev. The performance was made for the state ensemble Saltanat, but very soon migrated to other groups. Modern troupes try to maintain the authenticity of this issue. Today the asatayak dance is included in the Golden Fund of the country's cultural heritage. Similar to an asatayak, but having completely different functions, the instrument is stored in the Museum of Musical Instruments. Dudiga, despite the outward resemblance to the asatayak, it is not a shamanistic but a military instrument. This instrument was used as a military uniform. Mostly it was carried by soldiers and standard bearers. Due to the complex manufacturing technology, Dudiga was extremely rare among civilians. On a long stick, it was necessary to fix the hollow body. Most often it was made of goat skin. Wooden earrings were hung on this case, and the fringe crowned the top of the instrument. When the warrior shook Dudiga, it made the same sound as a few doubles. Musical instruments did not always get on the scene from the battlefield or the shaman's yurt. Many of them were used by hunters and shepherds to scare away wild animals and birds, and over time they began to accompany more independent musical instruments. One of such irreplaceable assistants in any ethnic group is a wooden rattle, sakpan. This instrument was made of solid dry wood. It is a bass with 5 wooden tongs fixed at only one end. In childhood, we sowed millet, and in order to scare them away from the bird crops, we at that we were children, made such rattles that looked like a sakpan. We did not even know what it was called, for us it was just a rattle. The main thing is that it was a good deterrent for sparrows. Later, when I came to study in Almaty, I became interested in musical instruments, found out that our children's toys were noise instruments of the sakpan family. Today, all of these instruments have found their place on the stage. Moreover, not only in folk music, most of the young groups strive to play European music on folk instruments. The authors work on the arrangement and look for unusual motifs for folklore instruments. One of these groups came up with its own direction, modern ethno-jazz.
Modern ethno-jazz бағыты ол яғни біздің бағытымыз
We called our direction that way because we want to show that Kazakh instruments sound good not only in ethnic style. They can play both jazz and pop. In general, any music can be performed on them. In addition, we want to introduce our instruments to a global audience.
танылу үшін қазақтың аспаптары ойналатын.
The guys have already taken their first steps. Concerts in Slovenia and Austria were warmly received by the audience. Indeed, each of the 5 members of the collective is a multi-instrumentalist. In total, the guys play more than 25 instruments, among which the main place is occupied by folk ones.
Қазіргі таңда біз 5-тен аса ұрмалы аспап қолданамыз. Соның бірі дабл, даулпаз, кахон деген инструменттер бар, дарбука деген инструмент бар.
We use 5 percussion instruments. Among them are double pass, there's an instrument called cajon. There is a darbuka and a large djembe. The last djembe is an ancient African musical instrument. It is very widespread in the world. We also play darbuka. This is a Turkish instrument. It is also ancient and is also widely known throughout the world. If we talk about the Kazakh dalpas, then there are no differences between it and African djembe. Only ours is sometimes bilateral.
Біздің даулпаз ешқандай айырмашылығы жоқ. Тек қана екі жақты бізде даулпаз болады.
As they say, a drum is also a drum in Africa. But nevertheless, no matter how simple, uncomplicated, and therefore similar percussion and noise instruments of different nations were, not each brings their own flavor to their sound. So it turns out that in the sounds of djembe, we hear the life of the African savanna. And in the rhythm of the dowel pass, we catch the clatter of hoofs in the native steps.